That walk is like coming out with bowling.
Hello,
Right.
everyone.
Hi, everybody. So thank you for being with us today. Obviously, we're like the headline act, I suppose, for the closing of the Writers' Festival. For those of you that don't know us, probably most people do, but I'm Tamsin,
I'm Charlotte.
and we are Two Girls Talk Balls with our handsome producer in the front that we let out of the cave sometimes, don't we?
In case you don't know about the podcast, it's a women's football podcast. It's been primarily focused on the WSL. It's been going for about 4 years now, so since and inclusive of the Women's 2019 World Cup.
Yeah, fab. So we're going to talk obviously about the Manchester Derby, which is going to be kicking off tomorrow. We are going to look at the wider WSL. Emma Hayes has overshadowed this talk a little bit, hasn't she, with a recent announcement, so we're going to touch on that a little bit and some of the standout performances.
Please do share any thoughts you have today or get in touch with us generally on our socials. We are Two Girls Talk Balls on Instagram and TG Talk Balls on Twitter.
X.
Okay,
so in just over 24 hours, we've got the first WSL Manchester Derby at Old Trafford, which is very exciting, somewhat overdue, I think, and that's something that we'll probably talk about a little bit. Ironically, I actually tipped Manchester City for the title this season. So, full disclosure, I am a Manchester United fan. I'm going to try and keep it as unbiased as possible. But we were saying how impressed we were, weren't we, with City's start to the season? But obviously that's kind of dropped off a little bit. 2 league losses in a row. And on the red side of the city, a little bit better fortunes, I suppose, coming off those 2 back-to-back 5-0 wins. So I suppose, Charlotte, looking at current form, what do you think?
I think it's helpful to think about this derby in context. It's the first time that it'll be played at Manchester United's traditional home ground. There is going to be a huge attendance at this point. There's over 40,000 tickets sold. The women's team aren't conventionally used to playing there a lot, so I wonder whether that will have an impact and maybe for those players feel a bit different. I think form-wise, if you just take the form, Manchester United are flying at the minute. They are the second top scoring side in the league, which is to be really commended because there's some people banging in goals all over at the minute. I think City have certainly started much better, and that's been the problem for them historically. They really have struggled to get going at the beginning of seasons, whereas now they've got the reverse problem. They're going through a bit of a sticky patch. I mean, they had some bad luck in a couple of games, the draw against Chelsea where they were subject to some quite poor officiating, and they've had injuries, which obviously we'll come on to chat about those that they're missing and players and things like that. I see it being closer than what people think and closer than what the performances say.
She's brave, that's why she sat so far away.
I do think, because if you look at where the teams are in the league, whilst they are third and sixth respectively, they're also not that far away in points. There's only 2 points between them, so I think we'll see a close game. I think we'll see United nick it, but we'll come on to predictions later.
Yeah, I think for me, we did talk about how Manchester United responded, certainly, or performed the first time that they played at Old Trafford. And I think, obviously, they did go on to win the game, didn't they? But the occasion, I think, took them by surprise a little bit. So I think, but coming into it, I mean, we've talked... And actually, I think this is probably part of the wider WSL conversation. I certainly think that we've broken away from talking a lot about how much City have now done for women's football. I think we are in a different era of that.
Definitely.
And where Manchester United have historically been underdogs, it's probably not the case now, is it, anymore? Certainly with how the WSL ran last year. So I think it's going to be a very, very tasty game. I'm hoping there's going to be lots of goals, actually, because no one wants a stagnant 0-0, do they? We all want goals. We all want to see the fire that they've got on show. Which brings me to the kind of next question, if you like. Manchester United were obviously very, very busy, weren't they, in the transfer window, and have brought in Mallard, Miyazawa, JC. We love Rod, so although it was heartbreaking for me to see her in a City shirt, I'm glad to see her back in the WSL. And City's pace and attack is absolutely frightening, and we've seen what it's capable of with Fowler, with Kelly and Hemp. Obviously, Alex Greenwood, we probably thought she was going to be out for a little bit longer, is that fair to say? But she is tipped to return. So I guess the question is, how much individual influence are there within the teams? Because we've talked about how they've come together, but what's the individual influence in each of those?
I think if we take the new signings for Manchester United, and particularly if you look at JC, and I know there's a particular player that you want to reference for United who's, you know, closer to our age but still banging in the goals.
The most goals.
I think that has really helped them, give them another dynamic. They were so reliant on Russo and Toon last season, and I think we can all accept that Toon's form has been up and down, I think, for the last 6 months or so. She's still a phenomenal player, and you wouldn't start a game like this, for example, without her. But you do need other players to shoulder the burden, and I think that's where JC, and we'll come on to Rachel Williams, probably has done. I think if you look at that pace in City's attack, though, it's absolutely terrifying to be playing against. Mary Fowler was outstanding, I thought, in the World Cup, and she's followed that through to her City form now. I think what that does mean is, and this is a real bugbear of mine and I won't hide it, I don't think City utilise that properly enough. I don't think really they move from back to front quick enough, often enough. I think sometimes they're so desperate to play the traditional possession football that they sometimes miss better opportunities to get themselves ahead in a game. And I think doing that tomorrow, doing that in the derby and generally, but particularly tomorrow away from home, could be critical for them in getting a positive result from this game.
Yeah, I think so. I think just to pick up on the Ella Toon point there, I think it's probably a fair kind of comment on her performances. But what we do know about Ella Toon is that she's absolutely built for these moments, isn't she? You know, if there's ever a player that you can turn to, and we saw that in the World Cup, we see that on the international stage as well. So I won't be writing her off just yet. Two players I wanted to talk about, actually. Rachel Williams, obviously, is like Manchester United's now super sub. I suppose, is that going to be her position? Is she ever going to start when we've had this influx of these players?
Probably not, and I think there's.
But is she happy with it? Does it matter if you come on and do the job? Does it matter?
She's not happy with it. She's coming off the bench, scoring all the goals. But I think she's also accepting that that is her role in this Manchester United side, and she's at the point in her career where starting every game probably is a bit much for her anyway. Yeah. So there needs to be another plan for Manchester United, and that's what that does. But it gives them another dimension, which for a few years, I'm not counting last season because I thought they were excellent last season, but prior to that, they really struggled off the bench. They really didn't have anyone to come on and change a game or to grab a game and win it, and that's or when they're, you know, subject to injuries. Yeah. And I think that's not the case now. On the injury point, I don't think you can overstate the miss that Alex Greenwood has been for City. Whilst they are still have the most clean sheets in the league, they have struggled, I think, without that leader at the back. I mean, it's quite clear that Steph Horton's no longer favoured in that role, and they're building another dimension away from that. But they still lack that leadership. And she's one of the best in the world at playing the ball out from the back.
She is. She's brilliant, isn't she, Alex Greenwood? And we know that Manchester United fans are friendly towards her whenever she's on the ball. So, but sometimes that is a little bit, you know, of impetus, isn't it, for people? Gets the adrenaline going if we see her there. One of the players that I wanted to touch on, which I suppose in some ways she's not like the global superstar that we've kind of talked about a little bit. And if anybody does listen to the podcast, I'm going to publicly eat my words here. Because I've not always been the biggest fan of Nikita Paris. But I think that she's been absolutely brilliant for Manchester United this season, actually. I mean, what is she up to? Is it 6 goals, 6 games, 3 assists? You know,
she's found form, hasn't she? Which she didn't have when she came back to the WSL with Arsenal.
Yeah, so I think looking at those players, I guess, that we've talked about, there is a lot of opportunity for individual brilliance, but certainly I think the Manchester United squad, I think there was a lot of fear, wasn't there, around Russo leaving and Honor leaving as well, but actually I think they've really risen to the challenge, and we see a little bit more of a gelled group than perhaps we've seen before, or that's how I feel about it. Before we get on to our predictions, which are always dangerous, aren't they? If we just think about the fixture last year, you actually were at that fixture, so you can talk about that in a second. There was a game-changing moment because it was where Ellie Roebuck played, wasn't it, for the last time after she was sent off for taking Nikita Paris out. But Garcia's late winner for United meant that the title race went to the final day. I suppose two questions. One is, are the Manchester teams in it this year? Are they in the title race?
I think absolutely Manchester United are in the title race, no doubt about it. I genuinely think tomorrow's result will, edge that for City if they can get. I think it needs to be a win, but they will get themselves back into that level because their draw against Chelsea, fair play, things like that happen. They got poor decisions, and Chelsea are the team to be going after, which we'll chat about later. But you can't drop points at home against Brighton, and that's the things that City are doing. So I think they really need a win, could stomach a point. I think if United come out with a point or a win tomorrow, it's fantastic for them. I really do, because they're ahead now. They've got to play the circumstance as well. And derby games, and these derby games across the WSL are becoming huge. So they're slightly different to sort of regular Sunday weekly games. And I think managing that, they'll show a really good level of maturity. I do need to quickly speak about the game last season because it was absolutely outstanding. The atmosphere at Leigh Sports Village was unbelievable. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Which
sunshine.
is a miracle in itself for those of us that have been to Leigh Sports Village.
It was really, really fantastic to be involved in. So I'm hoping that is replicated at Old Trafford. Obviously, the numbers will be slightly different and the setup will be slightly different.
Still a fortress, though, isn't it?
Well, for away teams.
This is when I get heckled. Thinking about that moment, that defining moment last year for Ellie Roebuck, unfortunately, I suppose, and we've kind of seen a drop out of favour. Obviously, we're not kind of privy, are we, to what goes on behind the scenes, and we've commended actually City for that in some ways. I think protecting players as kind of the women's game has risen, I think they've done generally quite well. And obviously there's so much hype, rightly so, about Mary Earps, isn't she? There she is. Not in person, sorry, I don't even know what then. Sorry, there's a picture of Mary Earps. But Keating, she is, or does seem to be favoured at the moment, and this is a huge occasion. Can she do it? Can she rise to it? Because I think these moments of pressure is when you do see the difference between the good and the best. Those people that can make those decisions. I think she is. I think if you compare the two keepers together, how Mary Earps has got her career back on track and the trajectory she's been on is phenomenal, because probably about 3 years ago there's not a chance she'd have pegged her as being England's number one, and the form that she's in. I think and Ellie Roebuck was flying at that point, and obviously something's not quite working out there for her, but like you've said, City are looking after that. I think if you look at Keating, this is a massive test for her. She's really, really young. She's an excellent player with her feet, and that obviously is one of the reasons why she's in the City side. Your favourite playing out from the back?
I obviously love playing out from the back. But I do worry about her in these big games, because you cannot let your concentration slip for a second, and in that environment, which is going to be somewhat hostile.
Well, the Barmy Army, I'm sure, will be out in force tomorrow.
Exactly.
So, Okay. That kind of brings us. We've talked about Williams, haven't we? We've talked about what she's capable of, and those individual players. I suppose the final thing for this, and I'm not sure how people will feel about it. You probably will have your own opinions about this. Obviously, we get the huge, huge numbers at these games, over 40,000. Hopefully, there will be more there tomorrow. Are more games at the Etihad and Old Trafford the answer at the bigger stadiums? Is that what's going to drive it? Because we have these huge tournaments and everybody feels, I personally think, we use the phrase a lot about a watershed moment, and I think it's a little bit naive. I don't think on a watershed moment, people talked about this in America decades ago actually, and it's never quite come around. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I don't know if it needs to happen. What do you think?
I think the TV deal helps what's going on, because I think you also need to see it against what these teams are doing week in, week out. I think sometimes you do need these big poster events at the point when you're still trying to grow a product, and nobody here can pretend that women's football still isn't in its growth phase. So having it at Old Trafford, having these games at the Etihad, I think are important still symbolically, but are less so than what they maybe were when we went to it, what was it, in the early 2019?
I'm still not talking about that game. Caroline Weir broke my heart that day. She really did.
But I think it's less so. I think what I prefer to see, and I've mentioned my experience at Lee Sport Village last season, I prefer to see those places packed out more on a more regular basis, because then you get a real view of how well the game itself is doing, rather than these sort of pinnacle moments on TV. And we don't mind saying that it's sometimes at those points you look at it and think, I hope nothing terrible happens in these games, because you want everybody to enjoy it in the way that we do in the round and watch it week in, week out. So are they needed? Yes. Are they needed? And do they perform the same thing that they did a few years ago? Probably not. I think the use of them is changing.
The product is better though, isn't it? The game is better. We're going to see a much more competitive game tomorrow, hopefully, than what we've seen historically. So I guess putting them on that platform there is, I think, very, very important. Right, we're going to come to the prediction time. You can tell us that we're wrong at the end in the Q&A. That's absolutely fine. It's probably no guess who I'm going to go for.
I got this by default, to be fair.
Go on then. Break my heart, we'll fight about it outside.
You'll actually be very pleased with what I'm about to say. I think United will run out winners. I think they might well concede first because of the occasion, but I think we'll see them come through in the end. Their willingness to win towards the end of games is something to behold at the minute. So I think we'll see United come away. I'm going to go 2-1.
You're not 2-1, yeah. The stats suggest, don't they? Because obviously Manchester United, I think, have got the highest expected goals per game. Is that right? But City have got the most clean sheets, which I was shocked about actually when I saw that.
Could be a ball draw.
We don't want a ball draw. I'm obviously going to go Manchester United, aren't I? Otherwise, I'd be daft. And I'm going to go 3-2.
Ooh, you're right.
Goals.
You really want a spectacle.
Well, I wanted a spectacle. Well, we got one the other night, didn't we? And this is going to lead us nicely to the next bit. Right, so that's the derby dealt with until tomorrow. We're going to come to Emma Hayes. We did say that she's partially overshadowed this conversation today, because I don't know, obviously, who everybody supports and how we feel about this. And I think it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it, sometimes? I think as we've seen the growth of the game, we're probably more neutral in some ways than we have been in the past. I think that's probably changing. But I've definitely felt an affinity to Emma Hayes, and I think she's been, a wonderful person to watch over time. But of course, she's leaving us to go stateside. Maybe not for Chelsea fans, but I suppose after 6 WSL titles, the only team to win it 3 consecutive times, 5 FA Cups, 2 League Cups, a Champions League final and a semi-final. What is the impact for the WSL to lose Emma Hayes?
We've spoken about this privately, but I think for me, I see it as the WSL losing the WSL figurehead at the minute. It's the only way you can talk about it. She has been the one for everyone to catch for years and years and years. Even when they weren't winning the league, she was so close, and her drive, she's helped drive the competitive nature of the product forward. She's helped talk about it talk about women's football beyond just the traditional sort of audiences of women's football. She was outstanding when she was doing punditry for the Men's World Cup, I thought, and that helped sort of bring cross followers over to the women's game as well. I mean, it will give everyone a chance, let's be honest. But I think it'll be massive. I think I wouldn't want to be the next person taking that Chelsea job, to be really honest with you. I think that...
Were you throwing your hat in the ring for it, Charlotte?
No,
This is the big announcement.
If it's going. I think it's absolutely massive for her. But so domestically, I think it will have a huge impact. I mean, if you're United, City, Arsenal, we'll come on to the other potential teams that might be up. But you've got to be galvanised by this news, haven't you? You must be rubbing your hands together.
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a knee-jerk reaction, wasn't there, when Emma Hayes said that she was leaving, and do these. You get people online, and I think there was a lot of talk of, well, Chelsea's done for, isn't it? Everybody's going to leave. Everybody's going to run away. Sam Kerr's already in America. You got this kind of like big explosion of that. And I think, she is important. She's been very, very important. She's been an advocate. She's quite good at speaking her mind, even though probably people don't always agree with some of the things that she says. But I think that she will be a loss. I think, Charlotte and I worked on the Chelsea documentary that when that was out on DAZN, and the director that we worked quite closely with, she often talked about Emma Hayes, and actually like the snippets of what you got to see as a human being were like a tiny fraction of what she's actually like as a person as well. And I think, I think Millie Bright has obviously been very complimentary. And so I think it will be a new look, won't it? It will have a new feel, and it will, when you lose those people within that kind of setup or organisation. And I will definitely miss seeing her. But what I will say is, I feel like we used to talk about her a lot more, and I feel like there was a lot more snappiness, perhaps, to some of the things that she was saying, and like we had this kind of like Ida-Val rivalry building, and I do think there's been less of that, and I think that maybe is that an acknowledgement that actually there is a time to change, and there's a time to grow, and there's a kind of a time to move on for her. But certainly for the other teams, I think it will be a change. It's a changing of the guard. Is that too dramatic? I don't know. She's been that important, hasn't she? She's been that influential. So I almost don't want to ask this next question because I'm worried about what the answer is going to be. Because, of course, she's going to the USA, isn't she? And it's been finalised this week. It's in time for the Olympics, which I'm going to see maybe is a bit more of a run-up tournament to see what she's going to do there.
I think so.
It's not a straightforward job, is it? Because we've seen kind of what's happened when you kind of do take your foot off the gas a little bit, and that's one thing she's certainly not done at Chelsea, ever. Is it? I suppose, I want to know what you think the international impact's going to be, but I also want to know if you think we have to support America now.
I'll flip reverse them. No, we don't. Internationally, I think she will have to take some time to adapt to it. So you've got to remember, international managers getting players for short. I mean, they get them more in women's football, but windows and pockets of time. She's not going to have time to home and alter people's career the way she has done with Millie Bright. I think that's one of the best examples of how spending time with a coach one-on-one and investing in a player gets really good returns. She's not going to have that with the USA, although the USA college gate system is quite different, so she'll be able to see for players from probably a lot younger and in a better way of viewing them than sometimes they get lost in football in England. They're in academies and things like that.
And that she is good at, isn't she? She's very, very
picking
much
out
an
those
advocate.
younger players. Yeah. I think you can see from the USA squad their focus is on the new breed of players. So you're going to see quite a lot of players in the very early 20s in this, and they will need some nurturing by older players. And I think what the key to that will be is who she picks as those players, who she really decides, right, these are going to be the footprint of the stalwarts that I'm going to help, shape the squad. I think that I definitely agree that the Olympics is giving her some time with the squad before the next major tournament. I think for her, it's a great decision. I wonder whether she might really struggle with that, not having one-to-one time with the players so regularly, like I've said. Will they be ready for the next and win the next major tournament? I'm not convinced, because it's got to be the World Cup for America. Whilst they obviously do have other international tournaments, they don't have a copy of the Euros, for example. There's not the same quality of teams that they're playing in there, so it's all or nothing. And they frame all their women's football teams to be supporting international football, like that's the pinnacle for those players. It's playing for the USA rather than playing for, you know, Chicago, rather than playing for Kansas, places like that. So I think it's going to take her some time to bed into that. And I think for that reason, it will take the USA some time to realise their potential with her in that seat.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it is a risk for her, isn't it? In some ways, because I think everybody knows this kind of mentality that's bandied around, certainly the American team, and success is expected. And being able to replicate that from what she's done in the WSL to what will happen on the international, stage is going to be quite difficult. And I think it would be naive to think that it's just transferable, and that's not always the case. It's like when we expect really great players to be great managers, and actually that's not what happens at all, really. But I like the fact that she's a risk taker. I think probably most people did expect her to step into a men's management role. I think that was certainly talked about a lot, and obviously it shows a commitment in a different direction. I suppose just anecdotally, to answer my own question, I will not be supporting America, although it would be easy for me. We were actually in a bar in Rome when they played against Sweden, and I delighted in that game, and unfortunately I don't even think I'm going to be able to turn towards that. I'm still burnt by Alex Morgan's celebration all those many years ago. I should probably let it go, shouldn't I, to be honest. I suppose she wanted to leave at the top. So the final question on Emma Hayes and Chelsea, can they win the Champions League?
I want to touch on the league first because I'm pretty smug on this.
You were going to say absolutely and you thought I was going to say league.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not letting you cut out this bit. I thought at the beginning of the season that Chelsea would win the WSL, and it's not that I don't think there are other teams getting close to them. She just has the blueprint to get through those hard yards which is basically between now and Christmas, and then that period, once you start back up again in January to sort of March time, they're really, really difficult months to get through, and she's able to know how to manage a side through that. There is not a chance she is leaving this league without winning the title this year. I'm telling her, this will, more than any season, I think she'll be desperate to leave with this one. I think Chelsea have some problems playing in Europe. I think sometimes they can be a bit found out sometimes, and I don't think they always bring the same form. They're doing well. They obviously only picked up a point during the week. They were
robbed, though.
They were robbed. But I think then that what they don't let that do is affect the league form. They tend to then grind out a result. But I think sometimes if they're fatiguing in the league, it does affect the Champions League form. And you can't look beyond that Barcelona side, can you?
No, I do think it will stop this Chelsea bias in a sense when she does go. I would love her to, even as a Manchester United fan, I would love her to win the Champions League. I'm not going to lie. I want her to go out with a bang.
Some people here disagree.
That's fine. I think it comes from a place, we talk about the WSL and we will vehemently argue with people it's the best league in the world, and this is our best chance to see an English team lift it. And, we're also burned from the Euro loss to Spain, aren't we? So we don't want another Spanish team taking another trophy.
We'll see.
Maybe that's just me. So yes to the title, no to the Champions League, even if she throws on her boots herself, no?
Definitely not if she throws her boots on herself.
That would be the spectacle we would all want to see. Okay, right, enough of Chelsea for those of you that are definitely not Chelsea fans. The rest of the WSL then, I think 6 games. Every team has at least one win. We were slightly worried about Bristol for some time, and Aston Villa, which we'll definitely talk about. It's only Chelsea and Manchester United that remain unbeaten, so it's probably an easy question, this. Is it the most competitive season we've seen?
Yes, because we haven't had this for a couple of years now, which I'm really pleased about. Sometimes teams can really quickly be caught adrift in this league, and you'll end up with one at the bottom. And because of the number of teams in the league, you win 1 or 2 games in a row, you're up 6 places. Mm-hmm. You lose them, you're really struggling at the bottom of a league. And we've not got that. People have been able to take points off each other within their sort of mini leagues, we'll call them. There's been some outstanding results where people have, got big headline results. I mean, the Brighton one at City comes to mind. It's definitely, without doubt, the most competitive. And I actually think the cross-board football, the football that the teams are playing that are sort of at the lower end of the league, is improving rapidly.
Yeah, definitely. I think we all thought probably we were on for a surprise Leicester win, didn't we, last week when they went 2-0 up against Arsenal. I got very excited about that, actually. But Arsenal doing what Arsenal are capable of doing, in the 6 goals from 6 different goal scorers, no less. We wanted to talk about Villa a little bit because, I mean, is anyone a Villa fan? No one wants to admit to it. Okay.
Not today.
Not today. Well, let's see. But last season we were very excited. We get very excited, don't we, sometimes about some of the transfers and what's happening with the teams and things like that. And obviously Villa and the performances last year. And I think not just us, but, you know, much more credited and famous than us, have also thought that Villa were going to be the team that was going to smash into that top section of that league. I think it was what we were all expecting. So I suppose the question is, are they a victim of pressure, or have they just been unlucky with a run of games that they got from the league?
There is no getting away. They have had some sticky games in that fixture, but I think if you pick out two issues for them, they were really unable to see a game out, whatever team they were playing. They get to 70 minutes, there's a complete capitulation, there's a disorganisation that comes into the side. That needs to be dealt with through coaching and management, so that's a problem they've had to deal with. And you look at how they performed against Spurs, who, you know, are a team that was expected to be beneath Villa in the league, and they absolutely battered them in the second half of their respective game. Yes, they've got off the ground against against Bristol. Had they not, I think there would have been real problems there. That was a must-win game, if ever there's been a must-win game for Villa. I think pressure is telling on them, but I think they have sometimes been the masters of their own downfall, like I say, with the way that they've managed the game towards the end of it. They have outstanding quality. They score really good goals. They've got goals within them. They will cause teams problems. It's how it needs to be in their head almost. They need to focus on what it's like to hold a lead in a game, and I think that is a skill in itself to learn, and that comes with pressure. If you can't cope with the pressure too well, then when you're ahead in a game and there's 10 minutes to go, you play with sort of a paralysis that stops you doing the right things for fear of doing something wrong. Yeah. And I think that is what they do.
Yeah, and I think that comes with, again, experience, doesn't it, at playing consistently at the top level for a long period of time. Obviously, we know that, because we were concerned, weren't we, about Carla Ward, and perhaps, you know, if she did lose to Bristol, I think the writing kind of would have been on the wall for her. But then we had those comments anyway that came out about that she still had the dressing room, which I think is very, very telling.
And she checked herself, hadn't she? So it's obviously playing on her mind as well. She knows the pressure that she was under personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose just kind of looking at some of the other teams that are there, what are the other standout performances, I suppose, both teams that we've been surprised by, things to look forward to for the rest of the season? This is a difficult period, isn't it, for lots of teams?
Yeah,
don't have a depth
getting
squad.
To that winter break,
yeah,
isn't
exactly,
it?
Yeah.
I think, for me, Spurs and Liverpool, look at where they're sitting in the league, 4th and 5th. Liverpool in particular, who have done things quietly under the radar. Matt Beard's been there a few years now, brought them back up from the Championship. And every year they've just one more little block on to improve on it. They'll have been gutted to lose the Merseyside derby, I think, against, for me, what is a poor Everton side at the minute as well. Had they got something from that, we would have been probably really singing their praises. But that just shows that, you know, the chink in people's armour. I think everyone in this league, and even the teams at the top, have got it within themselves to lose probably a questionable fixture that you'd think, what's gone wrong there? So everyone's got an off day in them.
Are you suggesting that they're going to beat Chelsea today?
Well, we'll see.
They like scalps, though, don't they, Liverpool? They have been good at doing that. So
I think for that, and I think Spurs, I think they had real problems, didn't they, last season? They started well and they were woeful from October onwards and managed to stop themselves being truly in the relegation battle towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
I think, yes, they've had issues with injury, but I think they now look like they have a proper style of play as well. So I think they're the two standout ones. I mean, Arsenal have done well, but they're still doing what's expected. I still expect Arsenal to be at that end of the league. Obviously, we've spoken about Villa, and I think the other questionable team, it's got to be Everton for me.
Right.
Their results have just not been good enough at the minute, and they only had a reasonable patch of the season last season where they played well enough. So I think they've got to take stock of what they're doing, get to the winter break fairly safely, and try and do something with that time they've all got together.
Yeah, I think just to pick out a couple of individual performances, I think Martha Thomas, again, she looks like a new player, doesn't she, at the moment at Spurs, and she's obviously very, very happy where she's playing. I think she's made comments in line with that as well, but it's obviously working for her, and I think probably people have been able to see some real capability of the way that she's been playing there, and she's certainly stepped up to the plate. So someone that I think that we wanted to talk about. I don't really want to talk about Chelsea again because we've done that.
That's enough.
But Niamh Charles, I mean.
Oh yeah, she's outstanding.
Her,
yeah, and I think I'm hoping that will manifest in her getting a bit more time internationally for England.
Yeah, fab. We've just got the wave, so it's actually come to a nice point there. That's our overview of everything that we wanted to talk about. I suppose if there are any questions from the audience about anything that we talked about or the podcast, Christian will answer them.
If there are any questions, just
not,
give us a shout and I can run over the mic just so everyone can hear.
You can answer this. Whatever it is, Charlotte's answering it.
It's not my PIN number.
Okay,
I'm
Charlotte,
now.
I'm only joking.
I just wanted to ask about, it's interesting, like, looking at managers in the WSL, and I feel like I've sort of been noticing a trend where managers get sacked a lot less than in the Premier League, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that. Like, personally, I see it as potentially quite a good thing, because the culture of sacking in the Premier League is just awful, like getting sacked after a couple of defeats.
Yeah.
But is it also a downside to the game that clubs aren't willing to get rid of managers when they're not performing?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, isn't it? I think, like, certainly like in the Premier League, and I suppose the WSL is similar in this respect. It's like there are only so many managers, aren't there, that those kinds of managers, those kind of figureheads that people want to have, and then you're just kind of stuck in this perpetual recycling of that happens. So I think I do agree with you in the sense of, like, I don't think that people should often be sacked as quickly as they are. But then, do we sometimes make allowances in the WSL for poor performance where that wouldn't be tolerated elsewhere? And if we are suggesting, well, we know that it is, it's a serious product. I don't know, is it because the pool's too small, or is there not enough to draw on just yet? Is there not enough experience? Are there not, these other... it's celebrity, isn't it? It's still celebrity, I suppose, in the Premier League and things like that. And is there enough to pick the pocket of?
I think sometimes we are too forgiving in this league, and I'll use...
You'd get rid of them. Charlotte would 100%.
I would
Carla
get rid of...
Ward would be sat here and she'd be grilling her. That's what would have happened.
She wouldn't have been sacked, but something would have been going on. I think we are too forgiving at times in the Premier League, in the WSL, and there's a useful result to contextualise this. The Leicester-Arsenal game the other weekend, 2-0 Leicester are up. Everyone celebrated what Arsenal did in the second half. I'm sorry, but Leicester absolutely capitulated. And if you don't call out those bad performances when you see it, it doesn't become a serious product. You have to have room for criticism as you have room for celebration. In the manager's respect, I think there's the problem with it. Financially, it takes so long to grow a club. So I think you've got to look at it as... You're not going to have someone, we certainly don't have owners at the minute, coming in and throwing money around and then the demand being, right, in the next 12 months you've got to do this. So I think the money and financial element does mean that you have to have more time, because a turnover of a manager often means a turnover of supplementary
Staff,
coaches
players,
and staff, and there just isn't the funds to do that. So there maybe is an allowance, and I think the expectations you might see Premier League or Championship clubs in the men's game going, right, you need to be in the top 10 for Christmas, you need to be in the top 6 for Christmas. Whereas it's probably a little bit more fluid in women's football. They'll be markers probably earlier in the season. We need to have picked up a few points here and there. But there is, because this league has so many breaks as well, there's a lot of stop gaps to allow you to take stock and see what you're doing and change the style of player that you're doing. Or, I mean, obviously you've got the January window to bring someone in if it's truly difficult. But I think the finances is what leads to that sometimes. Lack of want to sack them, because you are right, if you're looking who's out there, people will promote from within quite often because there's a better financial element, they know what they're getting into, but the market isn't the same as it is in men's football.
I think sometimes as well those like I don't want to say smaller clubs, but the clubs that are further down the table, I guess mediocrity is tolerated a little bit more there. I mean, like, for example, when, you know, Arsenal had a couple of run of bad results and it was like, get rid of Jonas. It was the first thing that was said. But that's not going to happen at Bristol, at Everton. And again, it's that drawing that person there, isn't it? So I think sometimes a little bit too soft. Yes, that is where I would stand on that.
I agree. But I can understand why that is manifested and why that comes out the way it is.
Not like you to sit on the fence. I'm surprised by this.
Unless, any more? Oh, behind you there. Christian, you can go after the gent at the behind. We hear enough from you.
You talked about wanting to see more, like, bigger crowds at Lee, and obviously that would be the ideal. But do you think that United need to do something about where they're based? Because obviously it's quite a distance away from Manchester and impossible to get to, like, for regular fans easily anyway.
1,000,000%, and it's also really difficult to get away from that ground. I'm quite fortunate. I live
around the corner as well, and
I'm
even
that
Charlotte's
side of
it.
Manchester, but even then, it's pretty horrendous. So you isolate your fans who are stuck on public transport, and the public transport system is woeful getting out there. The club do not do enough putting that on for fans. I have no issue with them staying there, but they need to make the access better, because I actually think the size of the ground works pretty well for them at the minute. I think you'd lose what they have as the fans and what they've created there if you go to something that's 25,000 seater, because you're not going to fill that on a 11:30 kick-off on a Saturday sometimes, or so you've got to. It's got to be steps, but 100% the access is appalling, and there isn't enough done about it.
No, I think this is where City have had that long-term plan, haven't they? And they've centred themselves, pretty much in the city centre. You can walk up to the campus, and that obviously it's much more accessible, even down to the transport. And this is a game for people. This should be easily accessible for everybody all of the time. And I think, without getting into a really long, marauding conversation about some of the issues that Manchester United have as a club, but Old Trafford itself is no longer fit for purpose. That's as a fan that goes there, it isn't fit for purpose anymore. It is being left behind, and there needs to be, I think,
more of a modern approach to how you access
football. Liverpool women as an example, the buying of the old, it was their old property, wasn't it, that they'd sold off, and then they've really reinvested in that, and that's a statement. That's totally a statement in itself, and that's going to have to come from the club top down. Should it be all the way out at Lee? Maybe not. I don't know what the scope is for them to do there and things like that. We can't rearrange the whole city. But if there's problems here with the main stadium, problems there, then I definitely do think that is their job to solve and to fix it.
Absolutely.
Should the club serve the people that support it? Ultimately, I think so. Yeah, I think that's part of what a football club is about. If you want to belong to something, it should be there for you to get to. So yeah, it's definitely an issue.
The man at the front.
Are you not fed up of us? You listen to us all the time.
You've not given me much to edit, to be fair, so I appreciate how smooth you're...
That's because it's before the watershed, Christian.
This will be available as a podcast as well. We've gone 40 minutes and not mentioned Queen Serena, so I just wanted to hear your thoughts about Serena Wiegmann. There's talk about her getting a new contract. I think she's got it through till 2025 already, but how transformative has she been for the game in England? I
think that you're just trying to get me to do my impression live. I think that's where we're going with this. And I'm a little bit rusty, so it might not be the time. I'll do it later.
Yeah, there's no doubt she's massive. And I think you cannot fail but to absolutely love her as a person. So I think that really helps it, because some people, I think, in football you can feel a bit ambivalent to. You can be like, oh well, they're okay, they're fine, they're doing a good job. Whereas she, I think, gets the buy-in for all sorts of reasons. The players clearly absolutely adore her. I think that comes out, and I think you can see when the players that play internationally, when they sometimes talk about the domestic managers, they don't always adore them. Yeah. But I think they realise that is part of the job of getting on. I think they absolutely love her. I think she's very fair in her responses as well, and she will hold her hands up when it's not gone quite right. And obviously, I think she is, and it was seen in the most recent tournament, I think she's still dealing with a squad which is changing somewhat, and she's not quite sure exactly who should be in there. But I still think she's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing, isn't it? Because it secures up what's going to happen in the future. There was obviously a lot of speculation about what would happen, and I think she made that comment that was probably taken a little bit out of context about, well, 3 years is a long time and things like that. So I'm going to be very controversial though. I think she has to win the World Cup. I think she's got to do it. You know, she gets to that opportunity again. With the Netherlands, with England, albeit with a weakened squad, but probably should have been done. That is how I feel about it.
I think we had the best squad at that tournament, even with injuries considered, and I don't think we quite got the equation right of how to get the best out of them in every game. I think that was it.
And I think who doesn't want an Emma Hayes-Serena Wiegman final, right? I don't know what we'd do. I would definitely go into some kind of like dark depression and have to do some soul searching. Anyone else?
Probably just got time for one more, I think.
Yeah. I know we don't want to keep you from the Chelsea-Liverpool game.
Yeah.
Hi, mine's about managers as well. Sorry, I just feel like there's this pressure on Arsenal, City, United to kind of kick Chelsea off that perch at the top. Skinner and Taylor specifically have kind of made comments that they've seemed like they're under quite a lot of pressure. So, like, how do you feel about do you agree that their job security is not great, or do you think that they're kind of being bought a bit of time by Hayes' departure at the end of the season?
I think they'll get time. I think this is quite a big moment in women's football, what's happened there. I don't think you can understate that. You've got someone who's monopolised winning for so long and gets the game inside out and has made it her career to know the game inside out. She obviously was a former player herself. Neither, for obvious reasons, Mark Skinner and Gareth Taylor won't have that same background with being men, but they will understand now, and should understand now with the length of time they've had the women's game, what it does take to win. So what you've got to remember is that those two are working at clubs with massive resources, so there's got to be expectations, there's got to be winning of things. I think Gareth Taylor should be under some pressure, because I think what he's gifted as an academy and a setup, they should be doing more with that club. I think they've been underperforming, quite frankly, for a couple of years as well. And he's had really good pockets of time, really good pockets of games and performances which have kind of taken the pressure off him. But if you look in the round, they're still miles away from winning the league, and they haven't really been close for some time. I mean, Nick Cushing got them close-ish, but there was still another leap to take. So I think the pressure on them is right, because when you look at the pressure, for example, Carla Ward was under, you look at Rhian Skinner, what she's been under formerly at Spurs. I think then you can't forego that just because one, they're men, and two, they're at bigger clubs, that they shouldn't be under the same comparable pressure. I think so. Do I think they're under too much pressure? Probably not. I think it's probably fair, but I do definitely think they'll get time. I think you'll see a lot of clubs taking stock and see how this knocks on with the league. I think you'll wait and see what clubs see that Chelsea players do over the summer as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you are right, though. There's this obsession almost, isn't there, with knocking Chelsea off this pedestal because of what they've had a stranglehold on it for so long. I mean, what happened last year, though, was there was you get one slip up, don't you? You essentially get one slip up in this league. If you drop 3 points, you almost can't drop another 3 points because of those other teams that are breathing down your neck. And that wouldn't happen in a bigger league with more teams that were kind of doing that. So I suppose in some ways maybe there is more pressure, but I completely agree with most of what you said.
The resources.
There's a pressure to be successful. I mean, you know.
Well, if that's your job, if your job is to be successful and the pressure's on there, I'd like to be at one of those 2 clubs who give you the skills to try and do that, I think. And pressure is a privilege at the end of the day. That's what you've got to remember. They're really lucky to have these jobs at 2 fantastic clubs as well. And we'll see what they're like tomorrow.
You are really auditioning for this Chelsea job. I'm sorry, but you've all heard it today. So.
There we go. But we'll see what they're like when they go at it together tomorrow.
So, show of hands, who's going to win United tomorrow? Nice. City? There was a good split there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so much, everyone.
for coming to listen to us. If you're not already a subscriber of the podcast, please do and download it. Thank you.
Thanks.